As the months went by, Alara's fears began to fade. Slowly but surely, she learned to trust Lucas, to trust in his love for her. She no longer saw her size as something that set her apart, but as part of who she was, a woman of strength, resilience, and kindness. The doubts she had carried for so long were starting to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. It wasn't an easy journey. Alara still had moments where the fear would creep back into her heart. What if Lucas changed his mind? What if he decided one day that being with someone like her was too much to bear? But every time those thoughts appeared, Lucas was there, steady and constant, reminding her of his love and support. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of Alara's cottage, watching the sun set over the fields, Lucas turned to her with a serious expression. "Alara," he said softly, his voice full of emotion, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Alara looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a little nervous. Lucas took a deep breath, then reached for her hand. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, "and I know that I don't want to face it without you by my side. You've shown me what true strength is, Alara. You've taught me so much about love, about patience, and about trust, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Alara felt a lump form in her throat, her emotions overwhelming her. "Lucas, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Lucas said with a gentle smile. "I'm not asking for anything right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel. I want to be with you no matter what." Tears filled Alara's eyes as she gazed at the man who had been so patient with her, who had shown her that love was not about fitting into a mold or being perfect. It was about being seen, truly seen for who you were. "I want that too." "Lucas," she said, her voice breaking with emotion, "I want to be with you too. I don't know how to say it, but I've never felt this way before. I've never felt enough, but with you I do." Lucas smiled and pulled her into a warm, tight hug. "You're more than enough, Alara. You always have been." That night, as they held each other close, Alara realized that she had finally found the love she had been searching for her entire life. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real and it was hers. A few weeks later, as the village prepared for the annual harvest festival, Lucas surprised Alara with a question that made her heart race with happiness. "Alara," he said, as they walked through the bustling village square, "I've been thinking. There's no one else I would want to spend my life with. Will you marry me?" Ilara's eyes widened in shock and joy. For a moment she couldn't speak, her mind racing. This was it. This was the moment she had always dreamed of, but never thought she would experience. She had spent so many years believing that no one could love her for who she was. And now here was Lucas asking her to be his forever. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." The crowd around them cheered and Lucas hugged her tightly. For the first time in her life, Alara felt like she truly belonged. She wasn't too big, too strong, or too different. She was simply Alara and she was loved. The wedding was a simple but beautiful affair. The entire village came together to celebrate the couple, and for the first time, Alara didn't feel like an outsider. She was surrounded by people who cared for her, who saw her for who she truly was. And she realized that she had found her place in the world. As she stood at the altar, holding Lucas's hand, Alara couldn't help but smile. She had spent so many years thinking she would never be enough, but now she knew the truth. She was enough. She had always been enough. After the ceremony, as they shared their first dance, Lucas whispered in her ear, "You're my everything, Alara." And in that moment, Alara knew that she had found the kind of love she had once thought was impossible. She had found someone who saw her for who she was, who loved her not despite her size, but because of everything that made her unique. As the music played and the stars twinkled above them, Alara and Lucas danced together, the world around them fading away. It was just the two of them, and that was all that mattered. In this final part, Alara and Lucas face their future together, and Alara finally embraces the love and acceptance she once thought she couldn't have. The story concludes with a joyful wedding and a sense of belonging, highlighting the power of love and acceptance. As the weeks passed, Alara and Lucas grew closer. Their connection deepened, and with every shared moment, Alara felt more at peace with herself. She had never imagined that someone like Lucas could truly care for her, but the more she spent time with him, the more she saw how much he valued her, not for her size or her strength, but for who she truly was. Still, there was something inside Alara that held her back. Despite all the kindness Lucas had shown her, despite his gentle words and steady presence, a nagging fear lingered in her heart. What if he eventually realized she wasn't the woman he really wanted? What if he saw her size as a problem, as something too difficult to live with? Alara often found herself staring out the window of her small cottage late at night, thinking about these fears. She had been hurt before, not by other people but by the belief that no one could truly love someone like her. She was different. She was too tall, too strong, and always felt like an outsider. "I'm just not meant for love," Alara would whisper to herself in the quiet of the night. "No one will ever truly accept me for who I am." One evening, after a long day of work on the farm, Lucas came to visit. Alara was out in the field, mending a fence that had been damaged by the wind. She didn't notice him approach, so when he called out her name, she jumped in surprise. "Alara." Lucas' voice was full of warmth, as always. "You're out here all alone? I thought you could use some help." Alara smiled, but her heart felt heavy. She didn't want to burden Lucas with her doubts, but she could feel her insecurities rising. She had never felt good enough for anyone, not really. Not when she was always so different. "Thanks, Lucas, but I can handle it," she said, trying to sound casual. Though she knew she was avoiding him, she didn't want him to see how unsure she felt inside. Lucas, however, wasn't fooled. He had grown to know Alara well, and he could see the sadness in her eyes. Without a word, he walked over and knelt beside her, picking up a piece of rope that she had dropped while working. "Alara, you don't have to do everything by yourself," he said gently. "I want to help. We can do it together." She paused, looking down at the ground for a long moment. She knew Lucas was only trying to help, but a part of her didn't want him to see her weaknesses. She didn't want him to think that she needed saving. "I'm fine, really," she said, her voice softer now. "I don't want to drag you into my problems." Lucas looked at her, his expression soft but serious. "Alara, you're not dragging me into anything. I'm here because I want to be, because I care about you, and I want you to know that you don't have to be perfect for me. I love you just the way you are." His words hit her like a wave, and for a moment Alara couldn't speak. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that he could love her despite all the doubts she had about herself. But the fear was still there, holding her back. What if he eventually grew tired of her size, her strength, her differences? "I don't know how to let myself believe that," Alara said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been told my whole life that I'm too much, too big, too strong, and I can't help but wonder, what if one day you feel the same way? What if you realize that I'm just too much for you?" Lucas took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Alara, I'm not afraid of your strength. I admire it. I admire you, and I'm not going anywhere. I love you for who you are, not despite it." For the first time, Alara allowed herself to let go of some of the tension she had been carrying inside. She looked into Lucas's eyes, and for the first time, she saw the truth in his words. He wasn't just saying what he thought she needed to hear. He really meant it. Still, the fear didn't disappear entirely. It lingered in the back of her mind, like a shadow she couldn't shake. She had spent so many years believing she wasn't worthy of love, that it was hard to imagine a future where she wasn't constantly worried about being too much for someone else. In the days that followed, Alara began to open up more to Lucas, though it wasn't easy. She started to let him help her more, whether it was with the animals or the farm work. She realized that it wasn't a sign of weakness to accept help. It was simply a way to share the load, to be together. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the fields, Alara took a deep breath and turned to Lucas. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice shaky. "And I think I'm afraid of being loved. I'm afraid that I'll always feel like I'm too much for someone. That no matter how hard I try, I'll never fit in, never be enough." Lucas stopped what he was doing and looked at her, his face full of understanding. "Alara, I've never thought of you as too much. You're not too big or too strong or too anything. You're exactly who you're meant to be. But what if one day you get tired of me?" Alara asked, her voice trembling. "What if you wake up one day and realize that I'm not who you wanted after all?" Lucas smiled softly and walked over to her, taking her hands in his. "I'm not going anywhere. I don't need you to change, Alara. I just need you to trust me." Alara felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. But Lucas just pulled her into a gentle hug, holding her close. In that moment, she allowed herself to feel the comfort of his arms around her, to let the fear slip away even if just for a while. "I'm trying," Ilara whispered into his chest. "I'm trying to trust you." "That's all I ask," Lucas replied, his voice warm and reassuring. "And I'll be here, every step of the way." The days that followed were still filled with uncertainty, but something inside Ilara had begun to shift. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be loved for who she truly was. And as long as Lucas was by her side, she felt that she could face whatever doubts still lingered in her heart. Ilara had always been different. From the moment she was born, it was clear she was not like the other girls in her small village. While most children played and laughed in the meadows, Ilara found herself standing apart. She was tall, taller than her father, taller than any of the other girls in the village. By the time she was a teenager, she had grown to nearly 7 feet. She towered over everyone, with broad shoulders and arms that were strong from working on her family's farm. But with all her size came a deep sense of isolation. Ilara never understood why she was so large. She often looked at the other women in the village with their delicate figures and wished she could be more like them. They wore simple dresses and moved with grace, their dainty hands picking flowers and sewing clothes. Ilara, on the other hand, had hands that could carry large bales of hay, and arms that could lift buckets of water from the well with ease. Her clothes never seemed to fit her properly, and her shoes were always too tight. The other villagers often whispered behind her back. Some said she was a blessing from the mountain gods, sent to help protect the village with her strength. Others spoke in hushed tones, wondering if a woman as large as Ilara could ever truly find happiness. "She'll never find a man who can love her," they would say. "She's too big. She's not meant for marriage." But Ilara couldn't ignore the voices in her head. She spent many nights lying awake, staring up at the ceiling of her small cottage, listening to the wind howling outside. She had often heard the stories of the beautiful brides who were married in the village, the ones who wore pretty white dresses, danced with their husbands under the stars, and had children of their own. She longed for that life, but how could she have it? No man would ever look at her and think she was beautiful. How could they? She was far too large, too different. She would never fit into the world of soft laughter and quiet conversations that the other women seemed to be a part of. "I'm too large," Ilara would whisper to herself, her voice heavy with sadness. "I'm not meant for a husband." Her father, a tall but gentle man, had always been her greatest supporter. He taught her how to plow the fields, how to tend to the animals, and how to be strong. But even he, who had always been proud of his daughter's strength, seemed to worry about her future. He would often sit with her after dinner, sipping his tea, and sigh. "You know, Ilara," he would say, "one day a good man will come along. You'll see." But Ilara never believed him. She couldn't imagine any man seeing her as anything other than a curiosity. She thought she was too big for love, too different to be accepted. Even when men would pass through the village offering kind words or smiles, she would retreat. She didn't believe they were serious. She didn't think they could ever love someone like her, and so Ilara buried herself in her work. She spent her days out in the fields, tending to the crops, repairing fences, and caring for the animals. The physical labor helped ease the pain in her heart. There, in the quiet of the mountains, she could forget the loneliness that often gripped her. The villagers, however, never left her alone. They admired her strength but felt pity for her loneliness. They would often try to set her up with men from nearby towns, but Ilara would always refuse. She knew it wasn't worth it. How could she even try when she was so different from the other women? She was too large, too strong, too much. One morning, as Ilara was walking along the edge of the village carrying a basket of vegetables to the market, she saw a young man approaching. He was walking slowly, his boots kicking up the dust from the road, and his broad shoulders were covered in a weathered coat. His eyes were kind, but there was something unfamiliar about him. He was a stranger. "Excuse me," the man called, tipping his hat as he drew nearer. Ilara froze. She wasn't used to strangers speaking to her. "Yes?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. "I'm Lucas," he said, offering her a warm smile. "I've just moved into the valley. I heard you have some of the best vegetables around, and I was hoping to buy some." Ilara looked at him warily. She had heard of Lucas, a rancher who had recently settled nearby, but she wasn't sure she wanted to get involved with anyone. Still, he seemed polite enough. "Sure," she said, taking a deep breath. "I have some carrots and tomatoes fresh from the garden." Lucas nodded. "I'll take a basket of each." I heard you're a hard worker, one of the best in the area. It's rare to see someone put so much effort into what they do." Alara felt her cheeks flush. She had never been complimented for her hard work before, not in a way that felt genuine. It was always about her size, her strength, but Lucas seemed to admire her for the effort she put into everything. "Thank you," she replied, her voice a little softer now. "I try." Lucas smiled again, his eyes twinkling. "I can tell. It's a rare thing to see someone care so much about what they do." Alara felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had never expected someone to speak to her like this. It was just a simple compliment, but it made her feel seen. After that, Lucas visited Alara regularly. At first, he came just to buy vegetables, but over time their conversations grew longer. He would ask her about her life, her work, her thoughts, and Alara began to look forward to his visits. There was something comforting about the way he listened, the way he didn't seem to mind her size, her strength, her differences. He accepted her as she was, and slowly Alara began to wonder. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as different as she had always believed. Maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could see her for who she really was beyond her size. But she wasn't sure. She wasn't ready to hope just yet. The days after their first meeting were peaceful, but Alara couldn't stop thinking about Lucas. She didn't know why, but there was something different about him. His kindness had touched her in a way she hadn't expected. It was as if he saw more in her than just her size, her height, or her strength. He seemed to see the real her, the part she had kept hidden for so long. She had always believed that no one would truly love her for who she was, that her large frame and rough hands would keep her from having a normal life. But Lucas didn't seem to mind. He didn't care about her size. He didn't treat her like a curiosity the way others had. Instead, he treated her like a person, someone worth getting to know. It wasn't long before Lucas visited her again. This time, he didn't come just to buy vegetables. He walked into her garden, his boots crunching the gravel beneath his feet as he approached. "Good morning, Alara," he called, waving a hand in the air. Alara looked up from the basket of tomatoes she was sorting. She smiled, though she still felt a little nervous. She wasn't used to people being so friendly with her, especially men. "Good morning, Lucas," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "What brings you here today?" Lucas paused, then stepped closer, looking at the rows of plants around her. "I was hoping we could talk for a bit," he said. "I've been meaning to ask if you'd like to join me for a walk sometime. I know a place up in the hills where the wildflowers grow, and I thought you might like it." Alara's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this. A walk with him? She had to admit she was curious, but at the same time she felt a wave of uncertainty. "Why would you want to walk with me?" Alara asked before she could stop herself. Her voice sounded more unsure than she had intended. Lucas smiled gently as if he understood exactly how she was feeling. "Because, Alara, you're interesting, and I like spending time with you. You don't have to worry about anything," he added with a soft laugh. "I won't bite." For a moment, Alara was silent. She had never been asked out on a walk before, certainly not by someone who seemed so kind, so genuine. She could tell that Lucas wasn't like the other men who had come to the village. He didn't want anything from her except her company. It was a strange feeling, but it felt nice. "I'd like that," she finally said, smiling shyly. "I could use a break from the farm." Lucas grinned, his eyes lighting up. "Great, how about tomorrow afternoon?" "Tomorrow sounds good," Alara replied. "I'll meet you at the bottom of the hill." The next day, Alara found herself both nervous and excited as she prepared for the walk. She wasn't used to being around men, especially in such a casual setting. She spent extra time getting ready, making sure her clothes were neat and her hair was tied back in a simple braid. She didn't know what Lucas was expecting, but she wanted to look nice, even if she wasn't quite sure how to do so. When she reached the bottom of the hill, she spotted Lucas waiting for her by the tall, swaying grass. He looked relaxed, his hands resting on his hips as he gazed out at the view. When he saw her, he waved enthusiastically. "Hey there, ready for an adventure?" he called. Alara smiled, her nerves easing just a little. "I think so," she said, stepping forward. They started walking slowly, with Lucas pointing out various plants and flowers along the way. He talked about his ranch, about the animals he cared for, and the things he had learned after moving to the area. Alara listened intently, finding herself enjoying the conversation more than she expected. There was something about Lucas, his calm demeanor, the way he spoke with such sincerity, that made her feel at ease. As they climbed higher into the hills, Ilara couldn't help but notice how beautiful the landscape was. The wildflowers stretched out in every direction, their colors a stunning mix of yellows, purples, and whites. The air smelled fresh and crisp, and the sun warmed her skin in a way that felt comforting. "Wow," Ilara said, taking a deep breath. "I've never been up here before. It's beautiful." Lucas smiled, clearly pleased to see her enjoying the view. "I thought you'd like it. I come up here a lot to think and relax. It's my favorite spot." They continued walking, talking about everything and nothing. Lucas shared stories about his childhood, about growing up on a farm in a neighboring town. He laughed as he recalled the mischief he and his siblings used to get into, and Ilara couldn't help but laugh along with him. It felt so natural, so easy to talk to him. For the first time in a long while, Ilara felt like she was just herself. Not the giantess everyone whispered about. Not the lonely woman who was too large to fit in. Just Ilara, the woman with a love for the land and a heart that longed for connection. As the afternoon wore on, they reached the top of the hill, where a small, peaceful meadow lay nestled among the trees. The wildflowers grew thick here, and the sunlight streamed down in soft beams. It felt like a secret place, untouched by the world below. Lucas sat down on a patch of grass, patting the spot next to him. "Come sit with me," he said. Ilara hesitated for a moment, but then sat down beside him. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt this calm, this at peace with herself. They sat in silence for a while, simply enjoying the beauty around them. After a while, Lucas turned to her. "You know," he said softly, "I'm glad we did this. I've really enjoyed our time together." Ilara smiled, looking down at her hands in her lap. "Me too," she said quietly. They sat there for a few more minutes, the peacefulness of the moment wrapping around them like a blanket. Ilara realized, with a quiet sense of wonder, that she didn't feel out of place beside Lucas. He didn't care about her size. He didn't mind that she was taller and stronger than most women. All he cared about was who she was on the inside, and that made her heart flutter with something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Over the next few weeks, Ilara and Lucas spent more and more time together. What had begun as a simple walk up the hill became a regular part of their routine. Every few days, Lucas would find a reason to visit Ilara, whether it was to help her with the farm or just to enjoy another quiet afternoon together. As their friendship grew, Ilara felt a warmth inside her that she hadn't felt in years. She hadn't realized how lonely she had been until Lucas started coming around. He was different from the others in the village. He didn't seem to notice how tall and strong she was. He didn't judge her for her size or see her as something strange or unusual. With him, she didn't feel like the giant bride who was too big for love. She just felt like Ilara. One afternoon, as they sat by the barn, watching the sun dip below the mountains, Lucas turned to her and said, "You know, Ilara, I've been thinking about something." Ilara glanced at him, her heart picking up speed. She hadn't realized it before, but she was starting to look forward to their conversations, even the small moments like this one. There was a quiet comfort in their silence, in just being together. "What's that?" she asked, her voice soft. "I've noticed something about you," Lucas continued, his voice thoughtful. "You work so hard. You always give everything you've got. But there's something more about you, something I think you don't see in yourself." Ilara raised an eyebrow, slightly confused. "What do you mean?" "You've got this strength," Lucas said, "not just in your muscles, but in your heart. I've seen how you care for the animals, how you take care of your farm. I admire that, Ilara. You're not just strong in body, you've got a deep kind of strength. A strength that makes people want to be near you, to be around you." Ilara felt her cheeks flush. She hadn't ever thought about herself in that way. To her, her size had always been a problem. It had been something that made her feel out of place, something that made her believe she would never fit in. But here was Lucas, a man who was not only accepting her but seeing her in a light she had never considered before. "I don't know if I'm that strong," Ilara said, looking down at her hands. "I just do what needs to be done." "That's exactly it," Lucas said with a smile. "You don't do it for praise or attention. You do it because it's who you are, and I admire that more than anything." Ilara didn't know how to respond to that. She had never thought about her actions in that way before. Most of her life, she had worked to prove herself, to hide the feelings of loneliness and doubt that haunted her. She never realized that someone could see her for the things she loved about her life, The care she put into her work, the way she took pride in it, and the strength she had. For the first time, she started to see herself through Lucas's eyes, and it felt different, good even. The days turned into weeks, and their bond continued to grow. They spent their time doing small things like fixing the fence on the farm or helping Lucas with some of his ranch work. But it wasn't just the work that drew them closer. It was the quiet moments, the shared smiles, the laughter, and the comfortable silences that made Alara begin to feel like she had found something she had never thought possible. A real connection. One day, as they were sitting by the barn, taking a break after a long morning of work, Lucas looked at Alara, his expression serious. "Alara," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Alara felt her heart skip a beat. What could he possibly want to say? Had she done something wrong? Was he going to tell her that he couldn't be around someone like her anymore? I've really enjoyed our time together, Lucas continued. More than I can say, and I've come to realize something that's been on my mind for a while now. Ilara's heart began to race. She had no idea where this conversation was going, but she couldn't help feeling a little nervous. What was he about to say? I think I care about you, Alara, Lucas said, his voice soft but steady. Alara froze. The words took a moment to sink in. Care about her? Did he mean it in the way she thought he did? Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of the emotions suddenly flooding her chest. You mean like, as a friend? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had to ask just to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Lucas smiled warmly, his eyes filled with sincerity. No, Alara, not just as a friend. I care about you more than that. I think I've fallen for you. For a moment, everything around them seemed to stop. The sound of the wind rustling the trees, the distant call of a bird. It all faded into the background as Alara processed what Lucas had just said. He cared about her, in a way that was more than just friendship. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions. Could it really be true? Was it possible that someone like Lucas, someone so kind and gentle, could love someone like her? A woman who had always felt too large, too different, too much for anyone to truly care for? Lucas reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Alara, I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to rush you. But I wanted to be honest with you. I don't care about your size or what others think. I care about you, the person you are inside. Alara's heart swelled with emotion. She had always believed she would have to live her life alone, that she was destined to be different, to be too much for anyone. But here was Lucas, someone who saw her for who she really was, not for her size or her strength, but for the person she was beneath it all. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief. You don't have to say anything, Lucas said, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. I just wanted you to know how I feel. And if you don't feel the same way, that's okay. I just needed to be honest with you. Alara looked into Lucas's eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and kindness there. She felt a sense of warmth wash over her. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel too large, too strong, or too different. She felt seen, and she felt something else too. A flicker of hope. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. I care about you too, Lucas, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. I never thought someone could see me like you do. Lucas smiled, his eyes lighting up. I'm glad to hear that. And in that moment, with the sun setting behind the mountains and the world quiet around them, Alara felt something she had never experienced before. Peace. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to be alone after all.